everybody. Today on the channel I am breaking with tradition and asking an actually serious question. I am enjoying a Lada and I want to know if I should feel guilty about that. Before we get on to this episode of Points of View, let's instead talk about cars, shall we? What we have here is a 1985 Lada 1200, known in its home market as a VAZ 21013. Just in case you are somehow unfamiliar, the Lada is known to many as the people's car of the Eastern Bloc, the equivalent of the Trabant and a great many of other vehicles produced under single-party rule. It was birthed in 1970, being based on the Fiat 124, which had come out in 1966. There were allegedly some 800 changes made to turn the Fiat into a slightly more USSR-friendly variant, which included the use of thicker steel, meaning the car is some 90 kilos heavier than the original. You also have drum brakes at the back instead of discs, an engine which was never seen in the Fiat, and a whole host of other things designed to make the car overall a little more simple and durable. It was a smash hit, and if you consider this part of the Fiat 124 lineup, it helped make that model one of the best-selling cars in the history of the world. Believe it or not, but these were in production in some way, shape or form from 1970 until 2012, when they were still being built and sold for the Egyptian market. And the funny thing about the Lada, compared with, say, the Trabant, the East German car, is that it became rather successful outside of its intended markets. It's sort of an automotive boomerang, this, because it was based on the Fiat 124, but for the Russian market. However, when production of the 124 stopped in 1974, the Russians then began to sell it to us Europeans, here then badged as a Lada instead of the VAZ as it was known back home. So this model, while known back home as the VAZ 2101, instead here became known as the Lada 1200 on account of the, I think, 1198cc engine that you'll find up front, which drives, by the way, the rear wheels, deploying in original guise some 60 horsepower. This is a 21013, which is a later development of the car introduced in 1977, which saw service for, I think, the thick end of another decade. One of the issues with trying to research these cars is that facts aren't quite as reliable as they probably should be. In any case, this variant brought with it a number of improvements, including a whole extra 7 horsepower. The particular car that I'm driving today is owned by a lovely chap called Simon, who's had it for just over 6 years. It was originally supplied to Bulgaria, which is one of the reasons it is a left-hand drive car. It had already been modified, including most prominently the fitment of an air ride kit. Apparently, this is what all the cool kids in the East are now doing too. So at the press of a few buttons, you can have your Lada slammed, if that's your sort of thing. I must admit, it does look kind of adorable when you do that, even if it does also give the impression that the entire front suspension has collapsed. He has then subsequently done a few mods to the engine, having decided that he never got the opportunity to play with engines that way when he was younger, and this would be the perfect starting point. So it now has a new cam in it, it's got a modified carburetor and a new exhaust, a 4-to-2-to-1. He then rounded off these modifications by replacing the original 4-speed manual with a 5-speed and this impossibly long lever. Though he does say that's something he regrets, because with the ratios in this 5-speeder, it doesn't really feel like he's improved things much over the old 4. In 1983, the car then evolved into what we called the Lada Riva. However, it was still very much based on the same 124 underpinnings. Though it was certainly a more modern affair than this, it was still a car that prided itself on how affordable it was. And For a long time, the Lada was essentially the butt of many jokes because it was the car you bought new if you couldn't afford a new car. The driving experience, as you might expect of a Soviet block car built on 1960s cheap Fiat underpinnings, is quite agricultural. But I have to say, it's also kind of adorable. There are lots and lots of noises coming from it. The exhaust is actually quite fruity, and trying to rig it up today has been a little bit of a nightmare. The steering is very heavy at low speeds and then very vague above low speeds. The gearbox, actually, if you get it right, is quite delightful, but if you get it wrong, is not. I'm not sure it actually has synchros on it, but fourth is particularly difficult. You really got to let the engine slow down to get it home if you don't want it to make some really rather unpleasant noises. Fifth, I'm then told, is essentially redundant, and reverse is, I think it's in one of the back seats. Visibility is actually generally pretty good because you've got, well, lots and lots of glass everywhere, and if this car were placed on its roof, it would almost certainly flatten to about 2 inches thick. This, I'm sure, will not be an issue today. Oh, James, in your comic timing. One of the ways that Simon sold this car to me was he said it had more ashtrays than seatbelts. And he's right, because there are 2 seatbelts and I think 3 ashtrays. There is actually a basic stereo system, which is a little bit more modern than you might think. There are some very cool period-looking speakers on the back shelf, which are actually run by a little stereo hidden through here that you can operate via Bluetooth from your phone. So, yeah, that's nice. Ordinarily on this kind of road, being left-hand drive would be something of an issue, but this is such a tiny car, it really, really isn't. You can place it with millimetre precision, and maybe that's one of the reasons these are remembered quite fondly by some as something of a rally hero. Underdog, I think, might be a little bit more appropriate. Audi Quattro, it is not, but still, it was a lot of fun to see these things being hooned about. Even today, I'm pretty confident they're still being raced. Let's give it some, shall we? There's no rev counter, so I don't know when to change up, but I think that's it. It pulls okay, actually. I don't really know what speed I'm doing either, because that's also broken, so I'm just going to hope that it's less than 60. But you know what? I'm reasonably confident about that. There's so much play in this. I mean, look at that. That does nothing. Heel and toe can actually be done relatively easily too, and I don't think this van behind me really appreciates just how hard I'm having to drive this thing to do 5 miles an hour, apparently. He did warn me that 5th gear makes quite a bit of noise, and I see what he means. It sort of sounds like the gear lever's just dragging below the car. That's not a nice noise. Yeah, I'm going to put it back in 4th. Ugh. Oh yeah, it's so scary. It feels like this is a terrible cut and shut. The front and back half of the car. Oh, ow! Pipe down, you! That's in 4th. Ah, maybe it's speed related, I don't know. Ah, stop! Oh God, sorry Simon, sorry. Got a bit keen there. Perhaps unsurprisingly, ultimate grip levels in this car, not particularly high. Though it is, at all times, highly enjoyable. Yeah, the big worry with this is that you'll go around a bend and you'll think you've got it, and then the car will just decide, actually, it wants to be over there. I think Alfa Romeo copied the suspension geometry of this for the original 4C. That's what it feels like. If you tried to take this on the motorway or do any sort of long journey with it, you would very, very quickly fall out of love with it. That may be why in the 6.5 years that he has had it, Simon has only done about 6,500 miles. Still, that's better than some, I expect. Right, let's let this van past, shall we? in my head, he's Matt Farah and I am the piece of traffic in the way. There's a beautiful simplicity about this. There really, really is. I don't think if I had a child I'd want them driving it, because honestly, it's terrifying and it will every now and again just do what it wants. But the gearbox I'm really falling for. The pedals are great. The throttle, it's responsive. I mean, it doesn't have much, but it's responsive. Even the brakes are... Okay, no. Not even the brakes. No, the brakes are terrifying. They're so wooden. There's so much travel, and it doesn't actually seem to change how quickly you slow down. You just push harder, and it doesn't improve things at all. Your handbrake at least does, I think, work. I mean, it seemed to stop the car earlier. And I also really admire the old lady beads on the driver's seat, which I'm told are a necessity because there is a very, very uncomfortable metal bar on them that would otherwise not be very nice. Oh, crikey. To be fair, compared to the roads I'm sure this car was designed for, this is basically a racetrack. And it actually is reasonably comfortable, considering it's an old, cheap car on air ride that has a short wheelbase and was never designed to be particularly luxurious. That would be the VAZ 2103. It's okay. I'm sure we've all seen the Russian dash cams, and so we know the state of the roads over there, and that is why they tried to beef these up quite considerably to deal with, well, anything and everything that Russian roads have to throw at them.
As with many cars of this type, mechanical simplicity was key to the design, making them easier to both build and maintain. To that end, it's even possible to start this with a handle, and it has to be one of the last cars on Earth built that way.
And I suppose, now I've mentioned the R word, let's have a little bit of chat about that, shall we? Because I think we need to. The last time I drove one of these cars, it had been done up in a very sort of, distinctive way. Shall we call it communist chic? I must point out, this was a few years ago, but when that video came out, complete with me wearing a silly faux Russian hat, there were quite a few people who were a bit unhappy about it. Looking back on it, I can understand why, and though I personally believe greatly in the power of mockery when it comes to disassembling the fear associated with certain institutions, I can also understand why some of the imagery in there would be distasteful to some. I mean, if I were to dress up in, let's say, 1940s German military regalia and do a video, I would rightly expect a lot of people to be very upset about that. I mean, you know, I'm not a member of the royal family. I can't get away with these sorts of things. Bit of satire there from JM. Just call me Ben Elton. I actually noticed the indicator I actually just noticed the indicator self-cancel as well. That's quite nice and rather unexpected. And I certainly wouldn't have made that video like I did then. Now, I am a little bit daft, but I'm not entirely stupid. And it's very unfortunate what's going on. This is a non-political channel. I don't like doing politics unless it relates directly to sort of, you know, road user, car staff generally in the United Kingdom. I'm sure a few of you have spotted the flag on the dash, which is not actually a political statement. It was picked up by Simon when he did a road trip, not in this, to Ukraine a number of years ago, and he noticed that a lot of people were driving around with flags in their cars. I mean, you see it here, really, don't you? Every time the football is on. And then mysteriously, all those flags go away, usually around the quarter or semi-finals. But when this car got offered to me, I did start thinking, well, you know, crikey, this is a car built by the Soviet Union. And I know, technically speaking, that obviously is an organisation that no longer exists, but what came out of it is currently causing a lot of issues for a lot of people. And it is a very, very unpleasant and unfortunate situation on both sides. It's war. People are dying. It's not nice at all. My channel is a bit of fluff. It's a bit of silly throwaway entertainment, and I pride myself on the fact that it's for people that maybe have stuff going on that they don't want to think about, that they don't want to be bothered by. It's designed for people that want to get away from stuff. That's why I will gloss over all of the many things that have happened over the last few years. But then, when it comes to driving something like this, you kind of can't skirt around that issue. And I felt maybe the irresponsible thing to have done would have been to try... Oh, those brakes are really bad. The irresponsible thing to have done would have been to skirt around said issue. And I spent a while thinking about this. And I would love your feedback on the topic, because here's what I think. Unless you're talking about a vehicle that was personally used for the Department of Dealing with Dissidents, I think you've just got to try and take a positive approach with these things. Simon says that one of the greatest things about owning this car is the fact that it makes people smile, it makes people laugh. It reminds people of maybe that car that Grandad bought back in the 1980s, or a car that a friend had, or maybe for those who used to live in a country where these were the main form of transport for people. Maybe it reminds them of a happy time, a fond memory. You know, driving around with their dad, brother, mum, sister, their children, something like that. He tells me that on one occasion a lady just walked up to him and started talking Russian at him, or we assume Russian anyway. These are apparently still ludicrously popular in Ukraine, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other countries too. To me, one of the great things about these is that, let's just try and put aside for a second the social situation in which they were created, but the fact was, these were mobility for the masses. And if we are being entirely fair and just here, the Beatles' original spec wasn't exactly designed for a nice, friendly, cuddly bloke either, was it? I find it very difficult to actually hate people. I just think life is so short, and to be honest, I've got plenty of reasons why I would dislike someone. I just don't need to go looking for others. And when it comes to a car, I mean, I can't automatically hate this. It's adorable, it's lovable, it puts a big smile on people's faces. Even the last one that I drove, there is a personal story attached to that car that I know that I didn't share in that video, for two people actually. And that car meant a huge amount to them. It was, in of itself, a force for genuine good. This, while it's not going to go and cure cancer, and actually I smelled it as I went past earlier, it's probably going to do the opposite. Greenpeace are not going to like me driving this. That I can be sure of. Luckily, I don't think they subscribe to the channel. I adore this for the fact that it's a little bit of history, and if it does get people talking, I don't think that's really a particularly bad thing. I also got to say it has made me chuckle, because every time I indicate, the fuel gauge goes down. Indicate, empty. Not indicate, full. Indicate, empty. It's quite spacious, this thing too. I mean, you could actually take the family away in it. It'd be really good for the sort of person who wants to enjoy classic car shows and the like. They're also not that expensive to buy. You can pick up a really ropey one for about £3,000 to £4,000, a better one for 5 to 6, with really good examples costing then a bit more. Apparently this one is, over the next few years, likely to get a bit of restoration work. It needs some bodywork done, which honestly all of these always do, and then maybe it'll get moved on. But Simon has really thoroughly enjoyed owning it. He also has a 996 generation 911 C4S, and I've absolutely no doubt whatsoever this gets far more looks and stares from both petrol heads and muggles alike. So then, do I feel guilty for enjoying this car? No, not at all. Do I feel silly for the last review I did of one of these? Yes, I do. I enjoy driving this. I really do. And I suppose maybe at the end of the day, for us car people on a car channel, nobody's being hurt by what we're doing here. We're not promoting any sort of unpleasant regime or anything like that, I would like to think. And let's face it, the one that did build this is now long gone, at least in its original guise anyway, and so I see personally no reason why I shouldn't enjoy it. Am I entirely overthinking this? It's very possible, isn't it? And I would love you all to hop into the comment section and tell me if I am. I am, aren't I? Anyway, I figured it was the right thing to talk about it. So, yeah. Let's get her back. Gonna get some lunch at the pub. As ever, a big thank you to Simon for bringing his car out, and to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.